He walked away when she needed him the most, leaving her with nothing but a secret and a shattered heart. 5 years later, the billionaire CEO returns, but this time the stakes are higher, the truths darker, and the love he abandoned now holds the power to either destroy him or save him. Will she forgive the man who broke her, or will the past bury them all? Hi, beautiful souls. I'm your storyteller, James, and today I have a story that will take you on a journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel, share this story with your friends, and watch till the very end, because every twist and turn will leave you breathless. Let's begin. Ariana Johnson sat at her desk, the soft hum of fluorescent lights above, casting a muted glow across the office. The room was empty, save for her and the persistent tick of the large wall clock. Her hands moved over the documents in front of her, but her mind was elsewhere. Every few minutes, she found herself glancing at the glass office opposite hers. Ethan Carter sat behind his sleek mahogany desk, fingers steepled beneath his chin, eyes fixed on the city lights beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. His presence was magnetic, yet suffocating. Ariana had learned long ago how to navigate the storm of his temper and the icy detachment he wore like armor. Tonight, the air between them was heavier than usual. The subtle tension that had lingered over months seemed almost tangible, a delicate thread stretched to its breaking point. She knew she had to speak, and yet her heart hammered against her chest, threatening to betray her calm exterior. "Ethan," she began softly, her voice barely above the hum of the air conditioning, "there's something I need to tell you." He looked up, his sharp blue eyes narrowing slightly, a flicker of curiosity passing across his usually unreadable expression. He leaned back in his chair, crossing one leg over the other, the picture of composed authority. "I'm listening," he said, his tone controlled, measured but somehow colder than she expected. Ariana drew in a shaky breath, her hands tightening around the pen she had been twisting between her fingers. The words were heavy, almost impossible to say aloud, yet they tumbled from her lips before she could stop them. I'm pregnant, Ethan." Time seemed to freeze. The air grew thick, almost stifling. Ethan's pen stopped mid-note. The sharp edge of his composure faltered for just a heartbeat before he masked it with the familiar cold detachment. He leaned forward slightly, his voice clipped, almost mechanical. "Abort it. You'll regret this." Ariana's chest tightened. The words hit her like a physical blow, each syllable echoing through her entire body. She had known he was ambitious, controlling, but she had never imagined he could respond with such cruelty, with such calculated dismissal of a life she carried inside her. "You... what?" Her voice quivered, disbelief threading through her tone. "I said you'll regret it," Ethan repeated, his gaze now sharper, harder. "This child, it will ruin everything you've worked for, everything I've built." "But it's not about work," she whispered, stepping closer. Her heart ached to reach him, to bridge the gap between them with touch or words that might make him understand. "It's about us, about me, about our life." Ethan's eyes flicked toward her, but only for a moment, as if he had no intention of truly seeing her. His expression remained controlled, though a tension beneath the surface betrayed the conflict he refused to acknowledge. "This is not about us," he said finally, his tone sharp, decisive. "This is about survival, about control. You think you can just throw a child into this world and it won't cost you? It will, Ariana. It will cost everything." Her knees felt weak, and she gripped the edge of her desk to steady herself. She had believed for so long that Ethan cared, that beneath the arrogance, the cold logic, there was a man capable of love, of protection. Tonight, she realized that belief had been a fragile illusion. I can't believe you," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "I trusted you. I loved you. And that's your mistake," Ethan replied, standing now the faintest edge of frustration cutting into his words. Love is a luxury you can't afford in the real world. You'll learn that sooner or later Ariana felt her heart shatter into pieces that no apology, no explanation could ever mend. The weight of betrayal was suffocating, each heartbeat a reminder that the man she had given so much to had chosen himself over her, over their child. She turned abruptly, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor as she made her way to the door. Each step was heavy, deliberate, a statement of resolve. She would leave, she would survive, she would find a way to live without him. Ethan watched her go, standing motionless behind his desk, the glow of the city lights casting long shadows across the room. He didn't move to stop her. He didn't speak. He simply remained there, frozen, while the sound of her retreating footsteps echoed in the emptiness of his carefully controlled world. Ariana's hands trembled as she opened the door, the cool night air outside rushing in to meet her. The streets were quiet, almost too quiet, as if the city itself was holding its breath. She pulled her coat tightly around her, willing herself not to look back, knowing that if she did, she might not have the strength to walk away. She thought of the life growing inside her, a life that was now a secret she would carry alone. The responsibility, the love, the fear, all intertwined in a knot that seemed impossible to unravel. Yet beneath it all, a spark of determination flared. She would survive. She would endure. She would rise from this betrayal stronger than she had ever been. As she walked through the streets, each step took her further from the man who had broken her heart, but closer to the woman she would become. She imagined the days ahead, raising a child, building a life, creating a sanctuary where love and warmth were not conditional on power or control. Yet even as she tried to focus on the future, the image of Ethan lingered in her mind. His cold expression, the sharpness in his voice, the fleeting glance that hinted at something more, something unspoken. It haunted her. She hated him for the pain he had caused, and yet a part of her ached with the memory of what they had shared, of what could have been. By the time she reached the edge of the city, the night sky stretched endlessly above her, dark and infinite. She drew a deep, shuddering breath, feeling the weight of loss pressing against her chest. Her tears fell freely now, mingling with the cold wind that whipped through the streets. She told herself again, quietly, like a prayer, that she would survive, that she would not allow this moment, this man, to define her. She had work to do, a life to build, and she would face it, alone if she had to. But even in her resolve, the shadow of doubt crept in. Would she ever see him again? Could she ever forgive him? Could she ever allow herself to love and trust after such betrayal? The questions twisted within her, unanswerable, yet relentless. She didn't notice the faint glow behind the office window, the shape of a man standing still, unmoving, watching her retreat into the night. Ethan Carter, the man who had just told her she would regret life itself, remained in the office, frozen in a rare moment of uncertainty. For the first time, he felt the absence of control, the hollowness of his choice pressing against him like a weight he could not shift. The streets swallowed Ariana's figure, her determination and pain blending with the night. And Ethan remained, a silent witness to the consequences of his own coldness, the emptiness of the man he had chosen to be, and the life he had abandoned in a single, irreversible decision. Ethan watches her disappear into the night, and does nothing to stop her, though the ache in his chest tells him this choice will haunt him forever. The morning sun spilled over Clearwater Bay, turning the water into molten gold. The scent of salt and seaweed hung in the air, a sharp contrast to the stale, controlled offices Ariana had left behind. She stepped out of her small rental apartment, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder, and inhaled deeply, letting the breeze fill her lungs. Her cafe, Sunrise Brew, sat on the corner of a quiet street, its windows catching the sunlight and reflecting it back like a promise of new beginnings. The wooden sign swayed slightly with the wind, letters painted in warm cream tones. This place was hers, built from courage and determination, and every board nailed into its walls bore the mark of her resolve. Inside, the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans mingled with the subtle sweetness of baked pastries. She arranged croissants on the counter, checking their golden perfection, while Liam and Lucas darted around her, their small feet clattering against the hardwood floor, their laughter filling the room with life. Liam, with his mop of unruly hair and sharp blue eyes, had a mischievous glint that reminded her painfully of someone she tried to forget. Lucas, quieter but equally observant, mirrored the same features, the same stubborn set of his jaw, the same small smirk that had once made her heart ache. Both boys were reminders of love and betrayal, joy and heartbreak, woven together in a way she could neither untangle nor regret. "Mommy," Liam called, holding up a crooked drawing. "Look, I drew a rocket ship for breakfast." She laughed softly, her fingers brushing a smudge of graphite from his cheek. "That's amazing, sweetheart. But maybe we eat pancakes first before we launch anything into orbit, okay?" Lucas tugged at her sleeve, his small brows furrowed. "Mommy, can I help serve the muffins today?" She knelt, meeting his earnest gaze. "Of course, Lucas. You're my little helper." They spent the morning together arranging pastries, brewing coffee, and serving customers who had grown fond of the family that ran the cafe with warmth and care. Each interaction reminded Ariana of what she had built, a life that was entirely hers, yet inseparably linked to the boys she loved fiercely. The bell above the door jingled, and Ariana looked up to see a familiar face from the neighborhood. Mr. Hensley, a retired fisherman who had become a regular, waved his hand. "Morning, Ariana. The boys keeping you on your toes?" "They sure are," she replied, smiling. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Liam darted past her, balancing a tray of scones, narrowly missing a young woman entering the cafe. Lucas followed, steadying the tray in his small hands. Ariana exhaled, shaking her head, a mixture of amusement and exasperation curling at her lips. By noon, the cafe was humming with life. Regulars chatted in cozy corners, the aroma of coffee mingled with the occasional faint scent of the ocean drifting through the open windows. Ariana moved among the tables, her eyes constantly scanning, always vigilant, always careful. She had promised herself she would never allow her heart to be broken like it had before, and yet her mind occasionally wandered to thoughts she tried to banish. Thoughts of a man who had once held her world in his hands. She pushed the memory aside, focusing on the laughter around her, the quick bursts of conversation, the clinking of cups. Her life had become about structure, love, and the quiet victories of motherhood. Liam had started school that year, and Lucas was following closely behind, both children thriving in the freedom of their small, protected world. Evenings were her favorite when the cafe closed and the sun dipped low over the bay. The three of them would sit on the small wooden dock behind the cafe, feet dangling over the water, tossing crumbs to the seagulls and talking about the day. "Mommy, do you think we'll ever see Dad?" Liam asked one evening, his small face serious, voice heavy with curiosity and longing she had tried to shelter him from. Ariana's chest tightened, a wave of emotion rising that she quickly suppressed. "We'll see," she said softly, choosing words that were neither a lie nor a promise. "But right now we have each other, and that's what matters most." Lucas leaned against her, his small hand gripping hers. "I like it here," he murmured. "I like it with you." Ariana kissed the tops of their heads, feeling the warmth of their trust, their innocence. She had chosen this life. She had chosen to protect them from pain. She had chosen to let go of the man who had abandoned her and carve out a space where love could thrive without fear. Her thoughts often drifted to that decision, to the sharp, cold words that had been spoken, to the sudden emptiness of her life the day he walked away. She did not dwell on the pain, but it lingered like a shadow at the edge of her happiness, a reminder of what had been lost and what she had survived. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Sunrise Brew became a haven, not just for her and her sons, but for the neighborhood. People came for the warmth, the smiles, the sense of family that radiated from the small cafe. Ariana worked tirelessly, every cup of coffee a testament to her resilience, every interaction a reinforcement of the life she had rebuilt. She never allowed herself to think of Ethan, not beyond fleeting moments of memory. She focused on Liam and Lucas, on the meals, the bedtime stories, the scraped knees and whispered secrets. Every laugh, every small victory, every challenge overcome reinforced the life she had chosen. A life of independence, of love, and of quiet strength. But one morning, as she was rearranging the display of pastries near the window, a folded newspaper slid under the door. She glanced down, curious, brushing a strand of hair from her face as she picked it up. The headline caught her immediately, freezing her in place. Bold letters screamed across the top. Carter Industries expands to Clearwater Bay. Her hands trembled, the paper shaking slightly as she held it. She read the subheading, the words blurring through her mind. The sprawling offices, the new projects, the unstoppable reach of the empire that Ethan Carter commanded. 1,000 memories surged at once. His cold blue eyes, the words he had spoken, the life he had left behind. For a moment she felt the old ache, the weight of betrayal pressing down on her chest. She pressed her hand to her heart, steadying her breath, forcing herself to remain calm. Liam tugged at her apron. "Mommy, what is it?" She knelt, keeping her voice even though the tremor betrayed her. "It's just news about the city, honey. Nothing to worry about." But deep down, she knew it wasn't nothing. It was the first crack in the wall she had built, the first reminder that the past she thought she had escaped was still very much alive. She folded the newspaper carefully, placing it on the counter, but her mind would not let go. The thought that he could be nearby, that he might see her, might see Liam and Lucas, it was almost unbearable. For the rest of the day, every customer, every sound outside the cafe made her tense. She found herself glancing at the windows more often, scanning the streets, listening for the faintest hint of the world she had tried to leave behind. Even as she served coffee, wiped tables, and laughed along with her sons, a quiet storm raged inside her. She had survived his abandonment once, had built a life from nothing, but the news of his arrival brought a shiver of fear she could not deny. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Sunrise Brew, Ariana knew that the quiet life she had fought so hard to create might not remain untouched for much longer. Ariana's hands trembled as she stared at the newspaper. Carter Industries is coming to Clearwater Bay, and with it, the man who had once shattered her life. The morning air in Clearwater Bay carried the crisp scent of salt and the faint hum of distant seagulls. Ethan Carter stepped out of the sleek black SUV that had brought him into town, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored navy suit with the precision of a man used to control. Every movement was calculated, every thought measured, but beneath the surface a strange tension prickled along his spine. He had been to countless cities, overseeing countless projects, but something about Clearwater was different. Perhaps it was the quiet streets, the gentle sway of boats in the harbor, or the way the sun glinted off the water, in a way that seemed almost defiant against the glass towers he was used to. He had no idea that the very life he had abandoned years ago was nestled somewhere within this peaceful town. The expansion project was a standard affair on the surface. Offices to renovate, deals to negotiate, permits to sign. But Ethan moved with a sense of urgency today, a restless energy that even he couldn't fully understand. He strode down the narrow streets, scanning for a cafe he had been told was the local hub, the heart of the community. Sunrise Brew. He had no idea what waited behind its doors. The bell above the cafe jingled as he pushed it open, the aroma of roasted coffee and baked bread washing over him. He had entered countless establishments before, yet there was something immediately different about this one. Warmth radiated from every corner, subtle and inviting. Yet there was a firmness in the energy, a quiet authority that made the space feel alive. His eyes swept across the room automatically, cataloging the layout, the staff, the customers. And then he heard it. Laughter. Sharp, bright, and piercing. Laughter that he knew instantly. It was impossible to mistake. He froze, every muscle tightening, a sudden pulse of something he hadn't felt in years rushing through him. Two small boys were running around the cafe, darting between tables with reckless joy. Their laughter echoed off the walls, innocent and carefree, entirely unaware of the world outside. And then he saw them clearly. Liam, Lucas. The sharpness of his own blue eyes reflected perfectly in theirs. Every feature, every tiny gesture, a mirror of him. The curve of Liam's smile as he ducked under a chair, the quiet, observant stare of Lucas as he tried to balance a tray of pastries. It was impossible not to see himself in them. His chest constricted, a painful tightening that made it hard to breathe. Years of denial, of distance, of carefully constructed walls crumbled in an instant. He had walked away once, thought he could erase them from his life. And yet here they were, living proof of what he had left behind. He stepped further inside, almost unwillingly, drawn by the invisible pull of recognition. His suit made him stand out among the casual townsfolk, but he hardly noticed. His attention was fixed entirely on the two boys, who paused mid-laugh and turned toward him, their small faces curious. Liam, ever bold, tilted his head. "Who's that?" he asked Lucas, his tone tinged with both awe and suspicion. Lucas squinted, assessing the man. "I don't know," he murmured. "He looks different." Their small voices, carrying innocence and naivety, struck Ethan in a way no corporate meeting ever could. The sound of their laughter, their questions, it was all too much. A knot of guilt and longing tightened in his chest, leaving him suddenly disarmed. He realized with a jolt that he had never seen them properly. He had only imagined what they might look like, how they might laugh, how they might carry themselves. And yet here they were, perfect, alive, vibrant, untainted by the betrayal of their absent father. He tried to step back, to maintain his composure, but his body betrayed him. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his jaw tight, and for the first time in years, he felt something close to fear. The fear of being seen, truly seen, by the family he had abandoned. The boys continued to watch him, their blue eyes wide and unafraid. There was no recognition, no understanding of the man before them, yet every instinct he had screamed that he belonged nowhere else in the world at that moment. Liam's small hand reached toward a pastry on the counter, and Lucas mirrored him, their attention shifting back to the mundane but grounding them in the present. Ethan's eyes followed every movement, cataloging the details, memorizing them. He wanted to reach out, to speak, to bridge the impossible gap of years and mistakes, but he couldn't find the words. Then the moment came, the shift in the room's energy that made his heart seize. From the kitchen doorway, a figure emerged carrying a tray. Ariana Johnson. Her presence stopped him cold. Time seemed to slow. She moved with a graceful precision, balancing the tray as if weight itself had no hold on her. Her brown skin glowed in the morning light, filtering through the windows, her eyes scanning the cafe with the care and warmth of a woman fully in control of her world. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Every memory, every feeling he had suppressed for years, surged forward like a tidal wave. The sound of her voice, the curve of her shoulders, the faint glint of determination in her eyes. All of it reminded him of what he had lost, what he had betrayed. Ariana stepped further into the room, unaware at first of the man frozen near the door. Her eyes swept across the cafe, landing on her son's for a brief moment, then returning to the counter. And then they met his. Her eyes widened slightly, the tray tilting in her hands as time seemed to bend. Recognition flashed instantly, sharp, unyielding, like a blade she hadn't expected to face. Ethan's pulse quickened. The air between them was suddenly electric, charged with every unspoken word, every regret, every pain that had been buried in the years they had been apart. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain himself in ways that would never suffice. But the words caught in his throat. He realized in that instant that he was no longer in control of the narrative. This was not his office. This was not a boardroom where commands could bend reality. This was her space, her life, and the boys, his sons, stood at the center of it. Liam and Lucas looked between them, sensing the tension but unaware of its depth. Their curiosity flickered in innocent eyes, asking questions Ethan did not yet have answers to. Every instinct he had told him to step forward, to bridge the gap, to reach for Ariana and somehow reclaim the years lost. And yet he stayed frozen, caught between fear and longing, regret and the weight of consequences. Ariana's chest rose and fell as she steadied herself, balancing the tray with a care that belied the storm of emotions threatening to spill from within. She had not expected him, and now that he was here, she felt the old ache return, sharp and unrelenting. She took a careful step closer, her eyes locked on his, searching for an explanation, for a hint of the man she had once loved. But all she saw was the man who had walked away, who had left her to face the impossible alone. Ethan's hands twitched at his sides, a flicker of movement betraying the turmoil roiling beneath his composed exterior. He wanted to speak. He wanted to reach out. But the words were trapped, suffocated by the enormity of the moment. The cafe seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with tension and unspoken truths. Every patron, every object in the room faded to the background as the two of them faced each other, years of history condensed into a single heartbeat. And then, without warning, Ariana stopped. Her steps faltered, the tray tilting slightly. She froze completely, eyes wide, lips parting in a silent gasp. Recognition had hit, sharp and unyielding, leaving no room for denial. Ethan stood rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to do anything but witness the effect of his sudden, uninvited return. The boys, oblivious to the full gravity of the moment, continued their play nearby, the laughter now tinged with curiosity. It was a collision of past and present, a sudden eruption of everything that had been buried, and neither of them could ignore it. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the weight of the consequences he had tried so hard to avoid. Every decision, every cold word, every moment of abandonment crystallized into this one instant, and it was unbearable. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of the espresso machine, the clinking of cups, the distant crash of waves against the harbor. Every instinct screamed at him to act, to speak, to claim a place he no longer had a right to. And yet he stayed frozen, a man stripped bare by the sheer force of what he had returned to. Ariana stands frozen in the doorway, tray in hand, eyes wide with disbelief. She sees Ethan Carter for the first time in 5 years, and time seems to shatter around them. Ariana's chest rose and fell rapidly, each breath shallow and uneven. Her hands gripped the tray so tightly that her knuckles turned white, the porcelain cups rattling softly with every tiny movement. She had prepared herself for many things in the past 5 years, but this This unexpected, uninvited return of Ethan Carter was beyond preparation. You, you lost the right to look at me, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt deep in her chest. The words cut through the cafe like a blade, sharp and final. Every patron, every corner of the small room seemed to shrink, focusing entirely on the space between them. Ethan's blue eyes widened for a fraction of a second. The weight of her gaze, of her words, pressed down on him harder than any boardroom confrontation, harder than any business deal he had ever faced. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The guilt that had been simmering for years erupted into a tidal wave he could not suppress. I, Ariana? His voice was low, almost broken. He stepped forward tentatively, but she did not flinch. She did not allow herself to give him even a fraction of the control he had once wielded over her heart. "Don't," she interrupted, sharper than intended, her eyes flashing with the hurt and anger she had held inside for so long. "Don't speak. You have nothing to say to me anymore." The truth of her words struck him like a hammer. He wanted to argue, to explain, to justify, to reclaim the time he had lost. But the emptiness of those 5 years weighed heavier than any sentence he could conjure. He could see now in her eyes the fortress she had built around herself, the walls that had kept him out, and the family that had flourished without him. He lingered, uncertain, rooted in place. A part of him wanted to leave, to retreat into the safety of his old life, the sterile world of glass and steel where emotions were irrelevant. But another, stronger part, a part he had tried to ignore, drew him in, tethered to this place by the sound of the boys' laughter, by the warmth of the sunlight spilling across Ariana's determined face. Days passed, and Ethan found himself returning. Not boldly, not demanding a place he did not deserve, but quietly, almost invisibly. He would enter the cafe under the pretense of curiosity, ordering coffee, offering to carry trays, to fix a broken chair or a squeaky table leg. Each act was small, tentative, but deliberate. A silent apology etched into motion rather than words. The boys were naturally curious. Liam, always the bolder of the two, would approach him with cautious wonder, asking questions about airplanes, space, and the distant cities Ethan often traveled. Lucas observed quietly, his eyes sharp and assessing, taking in every detail of the man who had appeared in their lives so suddenly. Ethan found himself learning them slowly, carefully. He memorized the tilt of Liam's smile, the way Lucas scrunched his nose when concentrating, the sound of their laughter that could pierce the hardest armor he had ever built. Each detail etched itself into his memory, each moment a quiet reminder of what he had lost and could not reclaim. Ariana, meanwhile, kept her distance. She allowed him into the cafe, permitted the boys to interact with him, but she never let her guard down. Every step he took was measured, every interaction carefully observed. She wanted to believe that people could change, that guilt could lead to redemption. But her heart was scarred, cautious, and unwilling to forget. Ethan respected that. He never forced himself into her space, never attempted to smooth over the past with words. He understood, finally, that words alone could never erase the pain he had caused. Instead, he let his actions speak, letting the boys' laughter and occasional shy glances guide him toward the relationship he hoped to build. One afternoon, as Ariana prepared a tray of cookies, Liam and Lucas raced ahead of her toward the small play corner she had set up in the back. Ethan was nearby, arranging chairs after a customer had left, when the inevitable happened. Liam's foot caught on the edge of a rug. Time slowed in a terrifying instant as the boy stumbled, arms flailing. Ethan reacted before he could think, a reflex ingrained from years of instinct and muscle memory. He caught Liam mid-fall, pulling him safely into his chest, murmuring without thinking, "I've got you, buddy." The words hung in the air, soft and almost intimate. Ariana froze, tray still in hand, her heart thundering. The sound of Ethan's voice directed at her son, protective and gentle, stirred a storm of emotions she had no intention of confronting. Liam looked up at him, eyes wide with surprise, and then a small smile broke across his face. Lucas watched silently, curiosity flashing in his gaze, a mixture of admiration and cautious intrigue. Ariana approached slowly, each step deliberate, her chest tightening with a complex mix of fear, anger, and a reluctant flicker of something she refused to name. She placed the tray on the counter carefully, as if holding onto it could anchor her from the tidal wave of emotion crashing over her. "Be careful, Liam," she said, her voice calm but firm, watching Ethan closely. Every subtle movement he made was magnified, every glance noted, every small gesture analyzed. She did not trust him, not yet. She did not know if she could ever allow herself to. Ethan released Liam slowly, bending down to the boy's level. "You okay?" he asked, his tone soft, genuine. There was no arrogance, no entitlement, only concern. "I'm fine," Liam whispered, still holding Ethan's hand. Then, after a pause, he added, "Thanks." The simplicity of the words, the innocence behind them, pierced Ethan more than any apology could. For the first time, he realized that his presence here, in this small cafe, in this small life, could mean more than business deals, more than power, more than success. Ariana's eyes never left him. She was studying him, measuring him, weighing every fiber of intent, every subtle emotion. And though her face remained composed, she felt a tremor of uncertainty she hadn't experienced in years. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Customers came and went, orders were taken, pastries sold, coffee brewed. But beneath the rhythm of daily life, a silent current flowed between them, tentative, charged, unspoken. Evening arrived, the light outside turning amber, casting long shadows across the cafe floor. Ethan lingered, helping with closing tasks, stacking chairs, wiping counters, his movements deliberate, careful. The boys played quietly nearby, glancing up at him now and then, trust slowly building in their eyes. Ariana worked methodically, but her mind kept drifting back to that single word he had murmured to Liam. Buddy. The simplicity of it, the ease, the instinctive protection. It had awakened something she had tried to suppress, a memory of a man she once loved, a man she had lost, a man she had sworn never to let hurt her again. And yet she could not deny the truth forming in her chest. The past was no longer a distant memory. The present had arrived, bringing with it the man who had walked away and the boys who bore his reflection. She pressed her lips together, forcing herself to focus on the tasks at hand. But deep down she knew that the collision of past and present was only beginning, and there was no turning away from the storm that had just entered her life. One evening, Liam slips on the cafe floor, and Ethan catches him instinctively, murmuring softly, "I've got you, buddy." Ariana freezes, realizing the depth of his presence in their lives may be far more permanent than she ever expected. The morning sun painted Clearwater Bay in golden hues, the waves lapping gently against the shore, as if whispering secrets to the sand. Ethan adjusted the straps of his backpack, the twins chattering excitedly at his side. Liam's blue eyes sparkled with curiosity. Lucas's gaze was calm but expectant. The day stretched before them, full of possibility, but also burdened with unspoken tension. Ethan had never considered this side of life, the simplicity, the laughter, the ordinary joy of small moments. Teaching a 5-year-old to ride a bike was supposed to be easy, trivial even, but today it felt monumental. Every wobble, every stumble, every hesitant pedal strike mirrored the years he had missed, the moments he had abandoned. "Hold on tight, Lucas," Ethan murmured, steadying the boy from behind. His hands were careful, protective, but he felt the fragility of trust beneath them, the delicate thread that connected him to these children he had never really known. Lucas took a deep breath, gripping the handlebars, and with a tentative push, he pedaled forward. Ethan ran alongside, his heart pounding. "You're doing it," he shouted, a rush of pride and fear mingling in his chest. Lucas's small grin was triumphant, his confidence blooming under Ethan's silent encouragement. It was a fleeting moment, yet it carried the weight of years lost. Ethan knew this was only the beginning, a fragile thread of connection that he had to nurture carefully, without breaking. Meanwhile, Liam zipped past them on his own bike, laughter tumbling from his lips. "Look, Ethan, I'm flying." Ethan's chest tightened at the sound. The word flying seemed ironic, a cruel echo of the freedom he had once offered them by walking away. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to smile. "Keep your eyes forward, buddy." "You'll crash if you look sideways." Liam glanced at him with mischief in his eyes. "You're not so bad at this, you know." The boy's innocence struck him with the force of a tidal wave. Here they were, living, breathing, unspoiled by resentment, and yet every glance they gave carried echoes of him, of his blood, his mistakes, his absence. Later, on the beach, Ethan found himself teaching them football. Sand sifted between his fingers as he tossed the ball to Liam, then Lucas. The game was simple, chaotic, messy, full of laughter and falling. Every time one of them tripped or stumbled, he was there, steadying, encouraging, guiding, instinctively protective, silently aware of the gulf he had once created. "Catch it, Lucas," Liam shouted. Lucas lunged, missed, and fell into the soft sand. Ethan's arms were around him in an instant. "It's okay, buddy." "You'll get it next time." The word buddy escaped him before he realized it, soft and unguarded, an admission of connection he hadn't dared to acknowledge before. He looked into Lucas's wide, trusting eyes and felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. They ran, tumbled, and fell again, their laughter mingling with the crashing waves. Ethan's chest ached with every small victory, every moment of joy he had never shared with them. The sand stuck to his skin, the wind whipped through his hair, and, for the first time in years, he felt fully alive, painfully aware of what he had lost, yet grateful for this fragile present. By late afternoon, they were sitting on the edge of the pier, legs dangling above the water. Ethan fished for pebbles, tossing them one by one into the rippling waves. Liam leaned against him, Lucas curled up close. The quiet moments were heavy with meaning, laden with unspoken truths and fragile trust. "Ethan," Lucas began, voice soft, hesitant, "do you have a dad?" The question landed like a thunderclap. Ethan froze, heart hammering. He swallowed the lump of guilt lodged in his throat, struggling for words that would neither lie nor expose the full depth of his failures. "I made a mistake," he whispered, barely audible, his voice trembling with shame. The confession hung between them, fragile yet undeniable. He looked at them, his sons, and felt the enormity of the years he had abandoned, the moments he had forsaken. Lucas blinked, absorbing the truth, while Liam's face scrunched in confusion. "A mistake?" Liam asked. You, you left us." Ethan nodded, words failing him. He could feel the sting in Ariana's absence in the boys' lives, the love she had poured into them without him. He realized painfully that redemption would not be instant, that forgiveness was not a guarantee. It had to be earned step by step, day by day. The sun began to dip, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples. The air was tinged with salt and the faint scent of the sea. The boys were quiet, lost in thought, their minds processing the enormity of the revelation. Ethan's chest ached, a constant thrum of regret and longing, tempered by the hope of connection he had only just begun to glimpse. Ariana watched from the shore, arms crossed, heart guarded. She had followed them quietly, unseen, ensuring their safety, observing the slow, hesitant bond forming between Ethan and the boys. Every small gesture, every careful interaction was a test, a measure of the man who had once abandoned them. She hated that she was watching, hated that a flicker of hope stirred in her chest, hated the truth that lingered at the edge of her control. The boys were beginning to see him as more than a stranger. And if they started to believe, if they started to trust, how could she maintain the walls she had built around her heart? As the light faded, the boys sat closer to Ethan, their small hands brushing his, their laughter returning in soft, tentative bursts. The connection was forming, fragile but undeniable. Every movement, every shared smile, every whispered encouragement was a stitch in a tapestry of redemption, slowly weaving a bond that had once seemed impossible. Ethan's eyes met Ariana's across the distance. No words passed, but the understanding was clear. This was only the beginning. The path ahead was uncertain, full of tension, doubt, and unspoken emotion. And yet, for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something he had thought lost forever: hope. The evening air grew cooler, the sky deepening into twilight. Ethan helped the boys to their feet, brushing sand from their clothes, adjusting their hair, steadying them as they prepared to leave the beach. The moment was ordinary, mundane, yet heavy with significance. He glanced at them, a soft smile breaking through his somber expression. "I'll walk you home tomorrow, too, okay?" The boys nodded enthusiastically, their trust tentative but present. Liam's grin mirrored Ethan's own when he was a child. Lucas's eyes shone with quiet admiration. Ariana's hands clenched at her sides. She wanted to intervene, to pull them back, to reclaim control. Yet, even as her heart raced, she understood something she could not deny. The boys were beginning to see him as someone who mattered, and that terrified her. Liam and Lucas looked at Ariana, wide-eyed and innocent. "Mommy, is Ethan our dad?" Ariana's heart raced, her hands clenching the edge of the counter so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Liam and Lucas had just asked the question that had haunted her nights and invaded her every thought for the past 5 years. "Mommy, is Ethan our dad?" Their wide-eyed innocence pierced her chest, a mix of fear and longing tangled deep inside her. "No," she said firmly, voice trembling with more conviction than she felt. "He's someone who hurt me. Someone who left." The words hung heavy in the air. Ethan, who had been walking behind them quietly, froze. His chest tightened, and he felt as though someone had slammed a door shut on his very soul. Ariana turned her gaze to him, stern and unyielding. "I will not let you confuse them. They have grown without you, and you will not. Not now. Not ever." He said nothing. He wanted to protest, to reach for her, to explain. But every word that came to his lips sounded hollow, inadequate, and shameful. The years he had missed, the moments he could never reclaim, weighed heavier than the air around them. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, her heart pounding, her chest tight with unspoken fears. The night descended over Clearwater Bay, cool and calm, but the storm inside Ariana refused to settle. She closed the cafe, wiping down tables, her movements sharp and mechanical. Every sound outside, the distant hum of cars, the faint lapping of the waves, reminded her of him. Hours later, she stepped outside briefly to take a breath of night air, and there he was. Ethan sat in his sleek black car across the street, head in his hands, shoulders trembling. The dim glow of the streetlights caught his profile, the jaw set, the blue eyes hidden. And yet the tension, the exhaustion, the weight of years betrayed itself in every subtle motion. Ariana's heart twisted. She had imagined many scenes in the past 5 years, but none like this raw, unguarded display of vulnerability. She wanted to look away, to retreat into the safety of control, but her feet refused to obey. She moved closer, careful to remain unseen, and heard him mutter softly, "I don't deserve them. I don't deserve them." The words were barely audible, yet they cut through the night and lodged deep in her chest. He was crying silently, shoulders shaking, tears glinting in the dim light. The image of him, the man who had once been cold, distant, unfeeling, reduced to this fragile state, stripped bare by remorse, shook her to the core. She wanted to tell him to leave, to retreat, to spare himself further humiliation. And yet, even as her rational mind screamed to maintain distance, her heart betrayed her. She felt a strange, uneasy stir of compassion, of longing, of a pain she had buried deep inside herself. Inside, the cafe was dark and silent. Liam and Lucas were asleep upstairs, exhausted from the day's play, unaware of the adult struggles unfolding outside their window. Ariana's mind raced. She knew she could not allow him back into their lives completely. Not yet. He had hurt her too deeply. Yet watching him like this, so small, so human, so vulnerable, she realized that denying him entirely might also be impossible. Hours passed. Ethan remained there, immobile, until fatigue overcame him. His hands loosened, his head fell forward against the steering wheel, and his chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. He was broken, not by circumstance, but by the weight of the choices he had made, the years he had lost, the family he had abandoned. Ariana finally returned inside, the night pressing close around her. Sleep was elusive. Her mind replayed the moment again and again. His tear-streaked face, the helplessness in his posture, the whispered confession of unworthiness. She hated that she cared. She hated that the sight of him like that made her stomach tighten, made her heart ache, made her question the walls she had built so carefully. She poured herself a cup of coffee, staring out the window at the street where he had been sitting. The night felt endless, each second stretching, echoing with unspoken words, unresolved emotions. Ethan's presence lingered like a shadow over her thoughts, over the quiet hum of the empty cafe, over the gentle rhythm of the waves beyond the bay. She could feel the pull, the invisible tether that tied him to them, to the boys, to her, whether she wanted it or not. Morning arrived too quickly. The sunlight streamed in, spilling gold across the wooden floors, illuminating the cafe in warmth and normalcy that sharply contrasted the turmoil of the night before. Ariana was behind the counter, preparing for the day, her movements brisk, deliberate, keeping her mind focused on the tasks at hand. She had just started arranging pastries when a sudden commotion startled her. Customers were few, the cafe nearly empty, and yet the sound of a body hitting the floor echoed like a gunshot in the quiet morning air. Ethan collapsed inside the cafe, face pale, clothes disheveled, eyes closed. His chest rose and fell unevenly, arms splayed across the counter as if seeking support from the world. The years of emotional strain, the sleepless nights, the weight of guilt and longing had culminated in this physical manifestation, exhaustion that demanded recognition. Ariana rushed forward, her instincts overriding every caution she had maintained. She grabbed his shoulders, shaking him gently. "Ethan, Ethan, wake up." His eyelids fluttered, his mouth opening to form words he could not voice. The fragile facade of control he had maintained crumbled completely, leaving only the raw, human man beneath, the man who had been haunted by regret for half a decade. Liam and Lucas, awakened by the noise, peeked down from the stairs. Their small eyes widened in concern, innocent hearts sensing the tension and gravity of the moment without fully understanding it. Ariana's chest tightened, her protective instincts and unresolved emotions colliding violently. She could not deny the truth anymore. Ethan Carter was here, vulnerable, human, and utterly incapable of escaping the consequences of the life he had left behind. She felt the same pull that had kept her from shutting the door completely the night before, and knew that today would mark a turning point. The next morning, Ethan collapses inside the cafe from exhaustion and emotional strain, leaving Ariana staring down at him, heart pounding, realizing just how fragile the man before her has become, and how dangerously close he is to becoming an inseparable part of their lives. Ariana's hands trembled as she guided Ethan to a chair, the weight of his body against her arms heavier than she expected. She felt a surge of panic, the man she had kept at arm's length for so long now entirely vulnerable before her. His breaths came in shallow, uneven gasps, and she realized the full toll of the past 5 years was etched into him, physically and emotionally. "Ethan, you need water," she said firmly, fetching a glass and placing it in front of him. Her voice was steady, controlled, though her heart raced with conflicting emotions. Relief, fear, and something unspoken tugged at her chest. He reached for the glass with slow, hesitant movements, as though even the simplest act required monumental effort. When he finally brought it to his lips, Ariana observed him silently, noting the lines of exhaustion on his face, the pale undertone of his skin, the subtle trembling of his fingers. She hated that she felt concern, hated that his suffering stirred something inside her she had sworn never to feel again. The boys, Liam and Lucas, had cautiously descended the stairs, peeking around the corner. Their eyes were wide, confusion and worry mingling in their expressions. Neither had ever seen their father like this. Defeated, fragile, entirely human. "Mommy," Liam whispered, stepping forward, clutching a small stuffed animal he had brought down in his sleep. "Is he sick?" Ariana swallowed, her throat tight. "He's tired, Liam. That's all. He just needs rest," Lucas, ever the observant twin, tilted his head, scrutinizing Ethan's pale face. "Did he cry last night?" His voice was soft, almost fearful, but honest in its curiosity. Ariana's gaze flickered toward him, conflicted. She had seen him last night, tears falling silently in his car. She hadn't expected the boys to witness anything, but now they had. And yet she understood instinctively. They needed to see him as real, as flawed, as human. Ethan, aware of the boy's watchful eyes, tried to sit up straighter, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, guys," he croaked, his voice raw, strained. I, I'm okay. Just a little tired." Liam's small hand reached out tentatively, brushing against Ethan's arm. "You're our friend, right?" he asked quietly. Ethan's chest tightened. The word friend felt insufficient, inadequate, and yet infinitely precious. He nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Yeah, buddy. I'm your friend." Ariana's eyes narrowed subtly, her mind racing. She wanted to protect them, to shield their hearts from hope that could so easily turn to pain. And yet, even as she felt the familiar edge of fear, a reluctant part of her knew that denying Ethan completely was no longer possible. She guided him to a sofa, helping him settle into a position where he could rest. Every movement was deliberate, careful, infused with a strange intimacy neither of them had acknowledged. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead without thinking, a gesture of care that surprised them both. Ethan's blue eyes flickered up at her, gratitude and vulnerability mingling in the depths of his gaze. For a moment, the air between them was taut with unspoken words, with the heavy weight of past betrayals and the tentative spark of something not yet named. The boys, now closer, hovered near the sofa, their curiosity mingled with concern. Liam leaned against the armrest, Lucas sitting cross-legged on the floor, their small faces mirrors of the trust and innocence that had slowly begun to grow between them and the man they barely knew. I don't want you to get hurt again," Ariana whispered, almost to herself as she tucked a soft blanket around Ethan's shoulders. The words were a confession, not just for him, but for herself. A recognition that her heart, too, was teetering on the edge of vulnerability. Ethan's gaze followed her movements, noting every small gesture, every careful motion. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he allowed her to care for him, silent and grateful, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of exhaustion and regret. Hours passed in quiet tension. The cafe, usually a place of warmth and gentle chaos, had become a sanctuary of unspoken emotion. The boys drifted closer, eventually curling up near Ethan, seeking comfort in his presence, sensing his fragility and the tentative safety she allowed them to feel. Ariana watched, torn. She could feel the pull, the magnetic, impossible pull of a man who had once betrayed her, now entirely dependent on her care, entirely human in his pain. She hated herself for the stirrings in her chest, for the worry that had replaced her anger, for the undeniable truth that she still loved him, despite everything. Ethan, meanwhile, was acutely aware of her gaze. He felt the tension in the room, the unspoken rules of engagement, the delicate balance of trust he was not yet allowed to breach. Every sigh, every blink, every subtle shift of her eyes communicated boundaries he had no right to cross. Yet he remained silent, patient, willing to endure anything if it meant being near them, being part of their world, even if only marginally. Even the smallest moments were heavy with meaning. Ariana adjusted a pillow behind his back, and he flinched slightly at the gesture, unused to anyone tending to him so personally. She noticed and held her hand a moment longer, just to ensure he was comfortable. The boys began to whisper softly, their voices low, almost reverent. "Mommy, do you think he's really our dad?" Liam's question, innocent yet loaded with the weight of longing, reverberated in the small cafe. Ariana's heart clenched. She glanced at Ethan, his exhaustion and vulnerability laid bare, and then at the boys, their trust slowly forming in this fragile, uncertain environment. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to remain composed. We'll talk about that later," she said firmly, though her voice carried a faint tremor. Ethan's head rested back against the sofa, eyes half closed, watching her carefully. He understood the warning, the boundary, the wall she had erected around her heart. And yet, he silently vowed that he would respect it, navigate it, and one day earn the right to step through it. The afternoon faded into evening. Shadows stretched across the room, painting the walls with streaks of amber light. The boys finally drifted into sleep, heads resting against him, innocent and trusting. Ethan felt their warmth, their tiny breaths against his chest, and a quiet ache settled in his soul, a mixture of longing, guilt, and an unfamiliar hope. Ariana stood near the window, her arms crossed, body tense, heart pounding. She had faced him, guided him, and yet she felt utterly unprepared for the emotions his presence stirred in her. Every instinct told her to pull back, to protect herself and her children. Every heartbeat reminded her that some walls were meant to be tested. The night outside deepened, the world quiet around them. Inside the cafe, time slowed. Ethan slept fitfully on the sofa, the weight of years and regret heavy on his shoulders. Ariana watched him, torn between fear and something she could not yet name, a fragile hope she would not allow herself to trust. And then, a faint sound stirred her awareness, the soft, rhythmic tapping of fingers against a window, a presence she hadn't noticed, a shadow moving silently across the threshold. A figure lingers outside the cafe window, unseen by the boys and Ethan, watching the scene inside with unknown intentions, and Ariana's stomach tightens with unease. Someone has arrived in Clearwater Bay, and their presence could change everything. Ariana's hands shook as she closed the cafe door behind her, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. Her chest was tight, her mind racing, every nerve alive with tension. She had just sensed the presence outside the window, a shadow lingering too long, a weight in the air that whispered of intrusion. And then the words spilled from Ethan before she could speak. "You deserve the truth." Her breath caught. She turned sharply, finding him standing in the center of the cafe, pale and worn, the exhaustion etched across his face deeper than ever before. His hands trembled slightly, clenched at his sides, betraying the storm of emotion he tried so desperately to hide. Ariana's eyes narrowed, a mixture of fear and guarded curiosity pulling at her. "What truth?" she demanded, her voice taut, sharp, controlled. The boys had gone to bed hours ago, leaving only them in the quiet sanctuary of the cafe. Ethan's gaze fell, his eyes haunted, brimming with the weight of confession. "It wasn't me walking away," he murmured, his voice low, almost trembling. "It was my mother." Her brow furrowed. "Your mother? What do you mean?" He swallowed hard as though the act alone required all his courage. "When you told me, when I learned I was going to be a father, she cornered me. She gave me an impossible choice. She said—" He paused, voice breaking. "Choose your company, or the child." The words struck Ariana like a blade, sharp and cold. She took a step back, disbelief mingling with rage. "You're saying that's why you left? Because of her?" Ethan nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping under the weight of his own shame. "I was a coward, Ariana. I let fear and ambition dictate my actions. I chose the company. I chose everything except you. And it was the worst mistake of my life." Her heart ached with the complexity of it all. 5 years of pain, of struggle, of raising Liam and Lucas without him, now condensed into a single confession. The fury she felt battled with a flicker of understanding, a reluctant acknowledgement of the pressures that had driven him. "You expect me to just forgive that?" she whispered, voice tight with emotion. 5 years. Gone. And you want me to accept your explanation? Ethan's eyes were filled with desperation, a raw, pleading vulnerability. "No, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve it. I need you to know the truth. I need you to understand that I never stopped loving you." Never. Oriana felt the weight of those words, heavy and unavoidable. The intensity of his gaze, the trembling of his hands, the sincerity in his tone. It was impossible to ignore. And yet the hurt, the betrayal, the years of solitude and struggle demanded distance, demanded protection of her heart and the boy's trust. The room was silent for a long moment, the kind of silence that pressed on the chest, heavy and suffocating. Finally she spoke, her voice low but unwavering. "You should have fought for us. You had a choice, Ethan. And you didn't." "I know," he admitted, voice breaking. "And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. I will spend every day proving that I am worthy of even a fraction of your trust, of their love." Her eyes softened, unwillingly, but only slightly. She wanted to step forward, to bridge the chasm between them. But the walls she had built around her heart were high, and she would not tear them down hastily. The boys, Liam and Lucas, had become her focus again, her anchors in a storm she wasn't ready to navigate fully. Ethan's presence near them, the vulnerability he had revealed, made her wary, protective, yet something else flickered beneath her guarded exterior. A fragile hope she could not suppress entirely. Ethan stepped closer, careful, tentative, as though moving too quickly might shatter the fragile equilibrium she maintained. "I can't change the past, Ariana, but I can be here now. I can be the father they deserve, the man you deserve, if you'll let me." She looked at him, measuring every word, every subtle gesture. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself imagine a future where the past could be repaired. But fear, anger, and self-preservation held her back. "Prove it," she whispered. "Show me. Don't ask me to believe in words, actions." "Only actions." Ethan nodded, the intensity in his blue eyes unwavering. He would wait. He would endure. He would fight to earn what he had lost, no matter the time it took. The quiet of the cafe enveloped them. Outside, the world moved on, oblivious to the fragile web of trust and redemption forming within those walls. Ethan's hands, which had once wielded power in boardrooms and deals, were now empty, symbolic of the vulnerability he had never known. He felt every heartbeat, every breath, every glance of Ariana and the boys like a pulse in his own chest. Ariana watched him, torn between resentment and an involuntary desire to allow him closer. She hated that he had hurt her, yet hated more the thought of denying the boys a father, even one who had faltered so profoundly. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the cafe floors, illuminating dust motes that danced lazily in the fading light. Ethan remained near, silent but attentive, giving her space while never letting go completely of the bond slowly forming with Liam and Lucas. She moved to check on the boys, peeking into their bedroom upstairs, and saw them asleep, peaceful and unaware of the revelations she had just heard. Her heart softened for a fleeting moment, realizing that whatever mistakes had been made, whatever pain had been endured, the future remained uncertain, yet full of potential. Returning to the cafe, she found Ethan quietly sitting by the window, staring out at the sea. The stillness between them was heavy, filled with unspoken words, promises, regrets, and possibilities. And then a sudden vibration broke the calm. The sharp ping of a notification on Ariana's phone startled them both. She picked it up, her eyes widening as she saw a photograph: Ethan, Liam, and Lucas on the beach earlier that day, smiling, laughing, completely unaware of the storm about to descend. The photograph had been posted online, a stranger capturing the intimate moment. The caption was enough to set the world ablaze. "Carter Industries CEO spotted with family at Clearwater Bay." Secrets revealed? Ariana's stomach dropped. Ethan's head shot up, shock and dread mirrored in his expression. The fragile sanctuary they had built was now exposed to the world, the media, and the relentless scrutiny that came with his name. The tension was instantaneous, palpable, and suffocating. The boys' faces came to mind, their trust, their innocence. The consequences of this exposure could destroy everything they had been cautiously building. Ethan rose slowly, eyes dark with worry, guilt, and determination. "We need to handle this carefully," he said, voice low, urgent. "No one can know the full story. Not yet." Ariana's hands shook as she scrolled, seeing the comments, the shares, the inevitable gossip spreading like wildfire. "We don't have time," she whispered. "They're going to come for us." "They'll want to know everything." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had faced enemies in boardrooms and lawsuits, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The intrusion of their fragile new world, the threat to the trust and love they had just begun to nurture. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees, carrying with it a sense of impending storm. Inside, the cafe was tense, every heartbeat measured, every breath counted. The past, present, and future collided in a moment of perfect vulnerability and terrifying uncertainty. A stranger photographs Ethan with the twins and posts it online. The media storms in, threatening to expose the fragile bond Ariana, Ethan, and the boys have begun to build, and leaving them vulnerable to scrutiny, judgment, and intrusion. The sunlight streamed cold and harsh through the glass walls of Ethan Carter's towering office, but the warmth it usually brought felt hollow now. Headlines scrolled endlessly across phones, tablets, and news channels. Secret twins of billionaire CEO, Carter Industries' hidden family, shocker, CEO's private life, exposed. Who are the children? Ethan stood at the center of the boardroom, palms pressed flat against the polished mahogany table. His mind raced, yet a clarity had settled over him that he had never known. For the first time, ambition felt meaningless, wealth a hollow trophy, and control a burden he no longer wanted to bear at the expense of the people he truly loved. Ariana sat near the edge of the room, hands fidgeting in her lap. Liam and Lucas clung to her side, their small bodies tense, eyes wide and searching, absorbing the tension that seemed to hang in the air like storm clouds. They didn't fully understand the world of power, money, and influence, but they knew fear, uncertainty, and the sharp sting of adult anger when they saw it. The board members, a dozen sharp suits and harder eyes, had gathered in silence. Ethan's mother, Margaret Carter, sat at the head of the table, her gaze icy, imperious, and judgmental. The woman who had once forced him to abandon Ariana now looked at him as though his very existence was a betrayal, a personal affront. "Explain," Margaret's voice cut through the room like steel. Her fingers tapped the table with impatient precision. "How did this family come to be hidden from us for so long? Do you realize what this does to our company's image?" Ethan's jaw tightened, a storm brewing behind his blue eyes. He could feel the judgment of the board, the threat of scandal, the weight of expectation, but all of it felt smaller than the tiny hands of Liam and Lucas clinging to Ariana's side. His heart made the choice his mind had feared to confront for years. "They're my sons," he said quietly, voice carrying through the tense silence. "And this woman," he gestured toward Ariana, "is the mother of my children. Nothing in the world is more important to me than them." "Nothing," gasps echoed around the boardroom. Margaret's face twisted in fury, lips pressed tight as though she had swallowed her words entirely. "You are throwing away everything we built," she spat. "Your company, your legacy, our reputation." "I am," Ethan replied, calm but unwavering. Every syllable carried the weight of years of regret, the strength of conviction, and a truth that no corporate power could erase. "I'd rather lose my empire than my family." The room erupted into murmurs, some voices incredulous, others whispered in fear of the chaos this declaration might bring. The board leaned forward, their polished faces rigid, some hands clenching the edges of the table. "This is preposterous," one senior executive barked. "Carter Industries has never been about emotion, Ethan. Your duty—" "My duty," Ethan interrupted, cutting through the tension with a controlled fire, "is to protect the people who matter most, not just shareholders, not just profits. My duty is to my family. I will not apologize for that. I will not compromise them for a title, for recognition, for a balance sheet." Margaret's eyes blazed. "Do you even understand what you are saying? You're undermining everything. You're—" She stopped herself, as if struggling to find words that matched the enormity of his defiance. "You're making a fool of yourself." Ethan stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, and reached into his pocket. He pulled out the engraved CEO badge, the symbol of authority he had carried for decades, and placed it flat on the table with a quiet finality that echoed louder than any words. The boardroom fell into stunned silence. Heads turned, eyes wide, some slack with disbelief. Margaret's face went ashen, lips parted, and for the first time in decades she found herself powerless. "I resign," Ethan said, voice steady. Each syllable rang with unwavering conviction. "Effective immediately. I am done putting profits above people I love. This badge belongs here, with the company, not with me." My place is with my sons, with Ariana and nothing else. The boys clung tighter to Ariana, sensing the magnitude of the moment, even without understanding the intricacies of business. Liam's small voice trembled as he whispered, "Mom, he's really ours?" Ariana felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. She swallowed, her throat tight. She could see Ethan's determination, the weight of sacrifice he had chosen willingly, and her heart both ached and soared. The man who had walked away 5 years ago had returned, not just physically, but with a courage and humility that shook her to the core. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the sunlight glinted off the city skyline, reflecting the power and influence Ethan had once wielded. Now those reflections seemed hollow, meaningless compared to the warmth and chaos of family, of love, of the life he had chosen to reclaim. Margaret's lips trembled as she rose abruptly. "This is unacceptable," she hissed, but Ethan's gaze did not waver. He did not flinch. The fire in him now was different. It was not ambition, but love, resolve, and an unwavering moral clarity he had never known in boardrooms or shareholder meetings. The board murmured among themselves, divided and confused. Some nodded in cautious understanding, others scowled at the perceived loss of power. But none could dispute the finality in Ethan's actions. He had chosen his family over empire, heart over ambition. Ariana reached out subtly to touch his arm, a silent gesture of support, of acknowledgement, of fragile trust. Ethan's eyes met hers, a mix of gratitude, apology, and something deeper simmering beneath the surface. Liam and Lucas peeked around her legs, their small hands clutching her skirts, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of awe and cautious hope. Their father, the man they had barely known, had finally stood up, not for the world, but for them. Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of the decision settling over him. Yet for the first time in years, he felt unburdened. The badge on the table was a symbol of a past life, a life he no longer needed to define him. His heart, however, had found its true place. And as the room remained silent, frozen in the gravity of what had just occurred, the sound of phones buzzing, notifications pinging, and cameras flashing outside hinted that the world had not forgotten. Headlines would spread, gossip would flourish, but Ethan had made his choice. The twins tugged at Ariana's sleeve, their small voices whispering questions she couldn't answer yet. Ethan knelt slowly, bringing himself to their level, and for the first time allowed himself to be fully present in their world, vulnerable, human, and entirely devoted. Ethan resigns, placing the CEO badge on the boardroom table, while outside the media swarm descends on the building, cameras flashing relentlessly, threatening to expose the family's private life to the world, and forcing Ariana and Ethan to protect their children from scrutiny, judgment, and intrusion like never before. The chaos outside the cafe had not faded entirely, but inside a fragile calm had settled. The boys clung to Ariana, their small bodies tense, their wide eyes reflecting the flashes of cameras beyond the glass. Ethan knelt on the floor, meeting their gaze, speaking softly so that their ears could only hear him, the words deliberate and tender. "I know it's scary," he said, voice low but steady, "but nothing out there can touch us if we stay together." I promise. Liam reached forward, his small fingers brushing Ethan's hand. Lucas mirrored the gesture, their unspoken trust bridging 5 years of absence. Ethan's chest tightened at the weight of it, the gravity of every lost day, every missed laugh, every milestone he hadn't been there for. And yet, now they were here, and he would never walk away again. Ariana watched silently, her heart a complicated tangle of fear, love, and cautious hope. She had been hurt deeply, betrayed in a way that had carved scars into her soul. But the sight of Ethan kneeling before her, vulnerable and human, softened something in her that had been rigid and defensive for years. Outside, the cameras continued their relentless assault, snapping images, capturing fragments of their lives. But here, in this small sanctuary of wood floors and soft lighting, the world felt distant. For the first time in years, Ariana allowed herself to breathe, to feel that maybe some storms could be weathered together. Ethan rose slowly, standing before her, eyes glimmering with a mixture of remorse, hope, and an intensity that was almost unbearable. He reached out, hesitating for just a fraction of a second before brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Ariana. His voice was low, tremulous, but unwavering. Marry me, or don't. Forgive me, or don't. Just, just let me stay in our sons' lives. Let me be the man they deserve, the father they've been waiting for, the partner you might allow me to be. The weight of his words pressed against her chest. She could feel the raw honesty in them, the courage it took for a man like Ethan, once so controlled, so distant, to bear himself like this. Her throat tightened, emotions rising in a tidal wave she could no longer suppress. She stepped closer, the space between them charged, electric with the tension of unspoken longing and cautious vulnerability. Her hands lifted, gentle and deliberate, to touch his face, fingers grazing his jaw, tracing the lines of sorrow and strength interwoven in his features. I forgive you, she whispered, voice soft but unwavering. The words were heavy with meaning, not just a release of past pain, but an acceptance of the man before her, flawed, human, and changed. Ethan's blue eyes glistened. For the first time in years, tears fell freely, unbidden, not from regret, but from relief, gratitude, and a depth of love he had feared he would never be allowed to experience again. The weight of 5 years of mistakes lifted slightly, replaced by something that resembled peace, fragile but undeniable. Liam and Lucas, sensing the shift, bolted forward. Their small bodies collided with Ethan and Ariana simultaneously, wrapping them both in a tangle of laughter, energy, and uncontained joy. The sound was pure, unfiltered, and in that moment Ethan realized he had finally returned to the family he had lost, the home he had abandoned, the love he had once forsaken. He gathered the twins into his arms, holding them tightly, and felt the strength and responsibility of fatherhood anchor him in ways wealth and power never had. Ariana watched, a soft smile breaking across her face, feeling the fragile walls of her heart lower just enough to allow hope in. The sky outside had shifted. Sunset painted the horizon in hues of gold, crimson, and amber, casting a soft glow over Clearwater Bay. The waves lapped gently against the shore, a quiet accompaniment to the symphony of laughter, tears, and whispered promises inside the cafe. Ethan extended his hand to Ariana, a silent invitation. She took it without hesitation, fingers intertwining with his, a connection both tender and resolute. Together they stepped outside, the world waiting, but momentarily forgotten, their footsteps falling softly on the sand. The boys ran ahead, squealing with delight, splashing water as they darted toward the ocean. Ethan and Ariana followed, walking hand in hand, their feet sinking into the wet sand, hearts synchronizing with the rhythm of the waves. They paused at the water's edge. Ethan knelt briefly, allowing the twins to climb onto his back, holding them both close as they laughed and splashed, the pure joy of childhood flooding the scene. Ariana stood beside them, hand resting lightly on Ethan's shoulder, feeling the stability, protection, and love he had chosen to embrace fully. For the first time, the family was whole. Not perfect, not untouched by pain, but complete in a way that mattered. They were bound not by wealth, not by power, not by circumstance, but by choice, by forgiveness, by the courage to love despite scars and mistakes. Ethan pulled Ariana close, brushing the wind-swept strands of hair from her face again, and whispered against her temple, "This is where I belong. Right here, with you." With them, Ariana smiled, tears glinting in her eyes, and pressed her forehead to his. "And I won't let you go again," she said softly, the promise of years reclaimed in a single, simple vow. The sun sank lower, casting the water in molten gold. The family moved together into the surf, water splashing around them, laughter and joy mingling with the cries of seagulls overhead. Liam and Lucas shrieked with delight, Ethan holding them both close, Ariana at his side. Every mistake, every heartbreak, every long, lonely year seemed to dissolve into the rhythmic cadence of the waves. They were no longer defined by the past, only by the family they had chosen to build, the bonds that could not be broken, the love they had fought to reclaim. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep crimson and violet, Ethan, Ariana, and the twins stood together, a unit forged in fire and forgiveness, resilient, unshakable, and real. The world beyond Clearwater Bay could wait. Titles, money, and ambition had been left behind. What remained was pure, undeniable, and eternal. The family he had chosen, the life he had fought to earn, and the love that would guide them forward, together. As night fell and the waves glimmered under the first stars, Ethan and Ariana held hands with Liam and Lucas, knowing the challenges of the world would come again. But for the first time they would face it united, their hearts and family stronger than anything outside the bay.